You and I both watched Godzilla Minus One. So we're going to be talking about a movie that wasn't made in 1976, and we're actually going to release the video relatively close to when the movie actually came out.
A very rare occurrence. You're welcome, everyone. So, this is the first Godzilla movie since Shin Godzilla, which was 2016, or I guess the first Japanese one that wasn't an anime movie. And just like Shin Godzilla, it goes in a completely new and unique direction for the series.
Which wasn't always going to be the case because they really struggled to come up with a follow up to Shin Godzilla and eventually said, we don't have any ideas that are good enough, so that's why we're going in a different direction. Which is in contrast to most American made movies where they say, we don't have any ideas, but we're going to make one that's going to be the first of five.
Yeah, you're going to have release dates set up before you even know what the first movie is going to be.
And we all know how well that works out. If you're unfamiliar, you can check out the history of the cinematic gem After Earth.
Oh, jeez. Okay, that's not what I thought you would bring up here.
Well, I talked about it that 1 month about everything they were planning to do, and it was a lot.
Yeah, actually, I guess now that you're saying that, that is a good example. And I know this director was a huge Godzilla fan and had wanted to make a Godzilla movie, but didn't feel that the effects were up to par for what he wanted to do. And he's the one who was also in charge of the effects on the movie. These newer movies, like I said, they're going in very different directions. I don't always like them in the same way that I like the older movies. They don't feel like traditional Godzilla movies to me, but
You're just upset he didn't do his tail slide thing.
oh man, that is the worst thing that has ever happened in the series, other than maybe him flying in Godzilla vs. Hedorah. But there have been so many movies that have gone in so many different directions, even some of the ones that are more traditional, that I don't mind that it's different. I feel like this is a series that has been going on for so long and has had so many different versions of the character and so many different approaches to the basic idea that they could do anything and still successfully pass it off as a new Godzilla movie, I feel like.
Whether or not the movie itself turns out to be good depends on how they execute.
Yeah, which I mean, you can make the obvious comparison to the current MonsterVerse movies, which are terrible. I don't include Kong Skull Island in that. I actually thought that movie was pretty good. And it actually, I think that one relates more to this movie than the MonsterVerse Godzilla movies do, because they're both somewhat period movies. They both deal with World War II to a certain extent, and they both have characters that stand out and feel more like real people than the MonsterVerse Godzilla movies do.
Since we're touching on those, I wanted to say that I think it's hilarious that Godzilla Minus One had a budget of less than $15 million and was so good, and Godzilla vs. Kong, that pile of garbage, had a budget of over $150 million.
And it just shows how wasteful Hollywood is. And again, I mean, so much of it is because it really is a product from the Hollywood perspective. It's not a creative endeavor in any real way.
No, and their idea of what people want is completely different. Because Minus One, Godzilla is the only kaiju in the movie. And he's not even really the main focus of the movie.
Yeah, he's barely in it if you look at the overall runtime.
Yeah, and Godzilla vs. Kong had a shit ton of kaiju, and I saw the trailer for the next one just earlier today, and it looked like it had 50 kaiju, whatever, the Empire Strikes Back or whatever they're calling it.
Oh, yeah, I could not be less enthusiastic about another American Godzilla movie.
Well, you would not fit in to this comment section for the official trailer. I could not stop laughing.
I'll have to go look it up. I can just imagine.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Minus One.
Yeah, so this movie is set back in the 40s, right after the war, or even starting right at the end of the war. Already a unique setup for a Godzilla movie. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah had scenes in World War II with the Godzillasaurus before it turned into Godzilla, so that clearly seems to have been an influence in terms of that idea here.
Which movie is that?
That's the one where they go back in time to try to erase Godzilla.
Is that the All Out Attack or whatever it's called?
No, that's a different one.
What is the actual title of that one?
That one is Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Out Attack.
That was a huge influence on this director.
Yeah, which you could really see. We won't spoil things, but the last shot is very similar to a shot in that movie. And even just that idea of the last shot, which for those who have seen it, I feel like that last shot, I think it was a mistake to put in this movie. It feels like it almost kind of negates everything that you just watched.
a moment of fanboyism by the director to kind of copy that other movie shot.
I think that's a good way to describe it, yeah. And it worked in that other movie. It fit there, but it doesn't fit what this movie is doing, in my opinion.
And I would say, aside from that last shot, this movie could stand on its own. It's not sequel obsessed or made with the intention of it being the first of 5. And that gives it more legs. And really, I would be interested in a movie following this one where there are no monsters and everyone is just dealing with the after effects of what happened. Like, now the disaster is over, so what do the people do about the fallout? How does the government now intervene, and what actions do they take, and how does that affect everybody? I don't know if you'd call that a Godzilla movie, because he wouldn't be in it, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like those kind of discussions are a big part of what made Shin Godzilla interesting, for example, or even The Return of Godzilla, when they were discussing kind of the global politics around everything. And this movie kind of dealt a little bit with like US-Russian Cold War kind of stuff. But they kept it mostly in the background. It almost felt like the opposite of Shin Godzilla in that way, where Shin Godzilla is all about what the government is doing and how they're reacting to everything and the decisions they're making. And this is very much the ground level perspective.
Yeah, the fact that the plan to stop Godzilla was a civilian effort because the government did not want to step in fear of upsetting international players. You're right, that was in stark contrast to Shin Godzilla, which focused so much on government and committee bureaucracy. And it was cool, because they both worked. It was satisfying to see both viewpoints displayed so successfully.
Yeah, and I think in this case, part of why it worked so well is because it was focused on the characters. And they definitely felt a lot more developed than maybe any Godzilla movie, I would say. I mean, Shin Godzilla wasn't really about the characters. It was about what they're doing and kind of a more strategic, logical kind of thing. But this is about the characters, their own personal struggles that they're dealing with. Because you could take Godzilla out of the movie and you're still going to have the same characters and the same struggles. But if you take Godzilla out of like Shin Godzilla, then you don't have a movie.
I think this one, in terms of themes, really pulled back to the 54 movie.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that definitely felt like the most similar in terms of the actual story content.
You know, we should do a video talking about that. Oh, wait, we already did. So you should go watch it.
I heard it was pretty good. I didn't actually watch it myself.
It's been a long time, so it's probably full of dumb jokes, which is even more of a reason to go watch it.
As opposed to the dumb jokes that we're making right now. But yeah.
I've got some for the end. You're going to have to wait till the end.
Great.
How did you feel about, what was her name, Noriko?
I kind of wish she had had a bit more development.
Yes, for sure. We got a little bit when they first met, and she was talking about her parents and how she found Akiko. But then after they started living together, very quickly, the focus was just on Shikishima. Am I saying that right? It would be Shikishima.
Yeah, Shikishima.
All those years I spent in Japan, you'd think I'd be able to pronounce it better. Godzilla. That's what Japanese sailors called him in song.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, it felt like, to me, once they kind of introduced the characters and got them in their places, it felt like they kind of simplified a little bit too much.
I wanted more build-up of his neighbor, because she was older, she had been through a lot, and she even mentioned that, we press on, but I wanted her to have more sit-down talks with both of them.
Yeah, I feel like the main guy, I mean, obviously he's the main character and his struggle is the focus, but they could have spent some of the time that was kind of scenes that we had already seen, that was kind of just emphasizing his feelings over and over. They could have cut a little bit of that out and replaced it with more character development for some of the other characters, and I think it would have been an improvement. I did think the movie was a little bit too long. Did you agree?
I did not.
Okay. I felt like it did a really good job of building up tension when you're getting to the Godzilla scenes, but some of the stuff in between I thought was a little bit too slow.
Well, the most recent Japanese movies I've seen were probably Shin Kamen Rider and Shin Ultraman, and those were too long. So compared to those, this one was not.
That's true, yeah. I mean, it was definitely better than those. I didn't like it as much as Shin Godzilla. I will say that.
I'd have to watch Shin Godzilla again, because how many years ago was that?
Yeah, 2016. If you haven't seen it since then, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's not so Shin anymore. That means new, right?
Yeah.
Okay. My joke makes sense. All right.
That's one of the meanings for it, yeah. So this movie started out on Odo Island, which was where Godzilla first shows up in the original movie. which is a fictional island. And before Godzilla shows up, you have those weird fish floating in the ocean.
Yeah.
Which reminded me of Gorgo. The same thing happens, basically, where these weird deep-sea fish pop up before Gorgo shows up. I think in that movie it was because like a fissure opened up at the ocean floor or something like that and released them. But in this movie, I kept questioning why that kept happening.
Well, I was thinking it was because the radiation was killing them.
Okay, but then I would think there'd be other fish floating too that were not deep-sea fish.
Possibly.
I mean, they would be the farthest away from the radiation. Because I thought it was just supposed to be that Godzilla was kind of bringing them up as he's coming up. Like they're kind of coming in his wake or something.
Maybe because they were deep sea, they were more susceptible to radiation?
I don't know.
I mean, all I know is as soon as you start talking about Gorgo, whatever the hell you're talking about, we're going to look at the analytics for his video and it's going to be like, viewership dropped off right here.
Hey, Gorgo is one of the best kaiju movies out there. Definitely the best non-Japanese or non-Asian one, because the host is also up there, and that's Korean. I guess the original King Kong. Okay, I guess there's a few good ones that are not Japanese, but it's a small number. On Odo Island, you had that Godzilla before it becomes the super giant-sized radioactive Godzilla. And I've heard people compare the design to the 98 Godzilla, and I see what they're talking about, but I definitely don't think that was intentional, or I wouldn't have seen it if people hadn't pointed it out.
Yeah, I did not make that connection at all.
But I did think, I mean, this goes for the CGI effects in general in the movie. Godzilla's movements, or just him as a CGI character, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the movie. It still feels very much like a CGI character. I do think the CGI is used a lot more effectively than it is in an American movie, for example, in a typical, in like a MonsterVerse movie. But the way he moves doesn't feel like it matches his size at all. And that first scene when he's not as big as he's going to be later, I didn't think it was a bad scene, but it was kind of ridiculous, unintentionally goofy especially when he keeps biting people and flinging their bodies away. I was kind of wondering why he wasn't just eating them or why he was attacking in the first place.
Is it true that Toho has a rule that Godzilla cannot be shown eating people?
Oh, that might be why. I know at least from when they kind of license him out to Western stuff, he's not allowed to. I don't think any of the monsters are allowed to eat people. And those shots when he's interacting with people, especially when he's biting them, it looked like they said, well, it would be too much work, which is understandable, to show his teeth going inside somebody, and obviously that would also get it a higher rating. But it seemed like what they did was they just took the airbrush tool and just kind of painted black over the person, over the point of contact with Godzilla. And I thought it looked really bad. I don't know about you. I thought it was very distracting.
I felt it would have been way more effective for that Odo Island scene if they had everything lit much less.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Because they're on a little island, just this little mechanic station. They wouldn't have huge spotlights and stuff. And they had the one to get the beach lit up.
Because, I mean, it was at night, too.
Right, and if that guy had just kind of kept swinging it around and Godzilla wasn't fully lit the whole time, I thought that would have made it more effective, because then not only would they be running for their lives, they would not be fully comprehending what they were running from.
I agree. That could have been a lot cooler. And then the later Godzilla design, after he mutates, personally, I also am not a fan of. It almost felt like going in kind of like a 90s extreme direction with the huge spikes.
Well, I think that was the director's intention.
He's portrayed Godzilla twice before, and going back again to Giant Monsters All Out Attack, that seems to be a design that he really likes, because that was kind of the first design that he kind of reused in one of his movies. And then he did some footage for a theme park that, when he was announced as the director, having seen that footage, I was like, oh, I don't want to see that, because that was super big CGI, felt very Western influenced in the worst way possible. And I'm glad the movie didn't turn out like that. But it's still, there were kind of some similarities to problems I had with Shin Godzilla with the CGI, where there are times when he's walking and seems very stiff and no reaction to anything and just kind of staring blindly ahead. And then all of a sudden he'll start moving really quickly and a lot more animatedly, I guess. It felt very inconsistent and distracting also.
I didn't feel as strongly as you about that.
Okay. I feel like his face just kind of lacked, I don't want to say emotion.
Life.
Yeah, it was just a little too just kind of like when he's chasing after the boat and it just looks like like a solid face chasing after the boat. I don't know. It didn't work for me.
Yeah, I think part of that was his eyes didn't move at all.
Yeah, that's part of it. I feel like the scenes that he was in worked from a dramatic standpoint, but they completely broke the sense of realism that everything else was achieving. And they did feel a little too like, look at how cool this is. Look at how like Godzilla's smashing so many buildings.
And I wonder how much of that was the influence from Toho themselves, or Toho saying, well, the audience is going to expect more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know how much of it, who was deciding what. I also wish that Godzilla had stronger motivations or something, because he's just kind of there in the movie. You were talking about how this movie kind of stands alone, but I feel like to a certain extent it was relying on you kind of accepting Godzilla just because you already know it's a Godzilla movie.
Well, I felt like in this movie, Godzilla was kind of just that force of nature that they have to deal with. Like, he doesn't need motivation, he just shows up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I feel like they either needed some kind of line about, maybe I could even see them saying that he was attracted to the lingering radiation from the atomic bombs or something, because they threw in a line at some point where, because they're planning for when Godzilla's going to come back, and I think they said something about that he was claiming his territory, that he had decided that that's where he was going to be. But it's just a throwaway line that I was like, wait, how did you come to that conclusion? That doesn't make any sense.
But I did like, in contrast to that, when they were making the plan and people were asking the head scientist questions about his plan, saying, how do you know this will work? Or why did you decide to do this? And he admits, we're making the best guesses we can, but we don't know if it's going to work, which is in contrast to pretty much every American monster movie where they just make all these grand assumptions that always turn out to be correct.
Yeah, I really liked how those scenes played out like that. And again, that reminds me of stuff like Shin Godzilla or The Return of Godzilla, where they're discussing what they're going to do.
And from a character standpoint, I was looking at Godzilla because you said he didn't really have much motivation, but from the perspective of the movie and the main dude, like, I felt Godzilla represented, his guilt, the war itself, how he couldn't escape it, no matter how much he pushed it in the back of his mind or tried to run from it.
Yeah, from the perspective of the characters and their storylines, I think it works. It's just, to me, Godzilla as an element in the movie needed more development.
Okay. I mean, isn't that the significance of the title? Japan had just been torn down to nothing, but then Godzilla shows up and tears it down even more. So they're at zero, now they're below zero.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that, I mean, I knew what that meant from the trailers, but they didn't, I was waiting for them to kind of bring that up in the movie somehow, and they never did, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, but really, there's another hidden meaning. So Godzilla is king of the monsters, right? He's number one. And Ghidorah was like, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to be Monster Zero, which comes before the number one. What do you say to that? And Godzilla's like, you three-headed piece of shit. I'm going to be -1, so I come before zero.
Okay.
So that's where the title of the movie actually came from.
I didn't realize it was that deep, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you can put that on IMDb.
What did you think about Godzilla's beam in this movie? It seems like ever since the 2014 one, it seems like they've put a lot of focus on Godzilla using his beam as being a big moment for the movie.
Yeah, and that was done multiple times in this one. Like, the first time was when he was underwater and it kind of shot straight up vertically.
Yeah. I didn't like the spikes popping out before he shoots. That feels like another thing, like, oh, we got to make it extreme and cool. But then I also think, since we were talking about the MonsterVerse movies, it's funny how big of a difference there is between how destructive this Godzilla's beam was, and then you look back at that 2014 or whatever, and Godzilla's beam in that movie didn't seem to really do anything. They did the huge build up to it, and then he used it, and then it was like the fight just keeps going on.
Right. Whereas in this one, it's a nuclear explosion.
Yeah, which, again, you can see the influence of GMK in that as well, because his beam, the first time he uses it in that movie, I guess maybe that's the first time they really built up to it like that. And you have kind of the mushroom cloud afterward. What did you think about the acting?
From everybody?
I guess, because, I mean, Japanese style acting is different from Western style acting.
I felt like the two characters that did too much and went over the top were the captain and the kid. Like, I get it. You want some lightness in there, but for a lot of their scenes, it was too much.
Okay, so you thought it was too much kind of from, like, the goofiness of their characters.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought there was way too much from some of the characters when they're in stressful situations. Like when they're on the island and the one guy at the beginning is like drooling and everything. That was way too much. But I thought really a lot of the actors went a little too over the top sometimes.
I really liked the scientist.
I did too, and I was worried from the trailers. I thought he was looking like he was overacting, but the way he acted kind of fit his character, I felt like.
Yeah, and when he was trying to convince people to listen to him, he was very genuine about it. He didn't turn into a movie character to get everyone's attention.
And I liked the way the main characters didn't automatically agree with him just because they were friends and already knew each other.
Well, yeah, they were his biggest detractors in that meeting. They were like, prove your theories,
Yeah, but I also thought it was kind of absurd that it turns out that he's working with the government on these plans when he's been hanging out with these characters the whole time, and somehow, I don't know, it was a little bit ridiculous.
Oh, I totally agree. And when he was on the boat, he was like giving them all this inside information. It's like, when did you have time to get all that?
Yeah, it felt almost like kind of I don't want to say a lazy way to get that exposition in there or to get the characters to have information that they need, but it felt kind of just like a plot device to have him turn out to have that background, I guess. Something that bothered me a lot in a lot of the Godzilla scenes was the characters will just kind of stand there and watch what's happening, even when something is approaching them or they're about to get destroyed by whatever. I think of like when Godzilla uses his beam and the shockwave is approaching. Literally everybody just stood there and watched. And that happens a lot of times. When the characters were on the train, they see Godzilla approaching from a distance away, and I was expecting them to have gotten off the train by the time Godzilla arrived, but then you cut back to the train and they're still there staring out the window right when he's attacking it. I don't know, did that bother you?
A little bit. But I did like the authenticity of when the people were running in the city from him, because we have that image in our minds of how silly it looks where everyone's kind of doing that movie running and looking back over their shoulders.
Yeah.
But this felt like people were genuinely terrified. It needed to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and I liked how much kind of direct interaction there was between Godzilla and the people, which again kind of goes back more to the first movie and GMK are really the ones where there's more direct interaction like that, with Godzilla actually killing people. There were a couple of scenes where there were tons of people, but then since you have to focus on the main characters, everybody else just kind of disappears and it's just the main characters all of a sudden. Like on the train, when the girl's on the train and there were all these other people there. As soon as Godzilla picks up the train, everybody else just disappears and she's just there by herself. And then later, when the main guy finds her, it reminded me of freaking Man of Steel when Lois Lane just pops up during the huge fight at the end with Superman and Zod where they're fighting all over Metropolis and she somehow just keeps popping up wherever they are. The main guy just finds the girl in the middle of this huge Godzilla attack in the middle of a crowded street, in the middle of a crowded city.
Yeah, that did bother me too when he ran up and just grabbed her wrist. I was like, you knew she was there, but that's a pretty big area and so much shit's going down right now.
Yeah, I think all you really would have needed was one shot even of just him saying like, oh, I know where she is. I have to like go to this. Or even maybe he sees her fall out of the train or something and knows that it's her. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, when that shot of him grabbing her wrist, it didn't show his face. And I thought she was going to like call out his name. And then it would turn out to just be a random guy being like, get up. We got to get out of here.
Yeah. And I think that would have been better.
And then she would say, yeah, I guess it would be stupid for me to expect it to be you. How did you feel about her being alive at the end?
I was having flashbacks to the Spielberg War of the Worlds, where the son turns up alive. It wasn't as bad as that. I hated that in that movie. This just felt unnecessary.
I get Shikishima. I think him ending his own personal war, being able to move on, that was good. But then having the whole we're one happy family at the end was too much.
Yeah, and it almost, in the same way as that very last shot of the movie, it almost cheapened earlier things a little bit. What did you think about, at the very end, you see the shot of her neck?
Yeah, it looked like something was pulsing, maybe?
Yeah, I three mistakes at the end, then, in my opinion. The very last shot, her still being alive, and that reveal, because that could be any number of things, and we don't know what it is, but it doesn't mean anything for the movie. It's completely unrelated to kind of everything that's happening with the characters. It's kind of a new element being thrown in at the very end.
Yeah, so really if they had just cut that whole part out, it would have been better.
Yeah, maybe if you're watching the movie, just stop it maybe 3 minutes before the end.
She could be a deadite. Could spread.
I mean, what do you think it was supposed to be?
I don't know. Was it going to be some sort of effect from Godzilla's radiation and it's going to affect other people? And what? I mean, normally when people get radiation sickness, they get sick and die. But the way it was pulsing and the focus was on it makes it seem like it was going to be something bigger than that.
Yeah, because I would think if she has that, then other people would too, because there were tons of people there. I thought maybe it was supposed to be something related to Godzilla's regeneration abilities, and that's why she survived, maybe. Or some kind of weird infection. I mean, we don't know what they're going to do after this, so if they do like Godzilla -2 or whatever, I mean, I don't know what they would call it, Godzilla -0.5.
Godzilla -1, 2.
That could lead in multiple different directions, but I feel like that kind of cheapens this movie, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially since Godzilla is pretty much done with at the end of the movie. Well, I mean, I guess he's not then, because then there's the last shot. I don't know. I think following up on this movie would be a mistake.
I agree.
But then it would also make that shot feel even more pointless. So I don't know.
They should just own up that they made a mistake and not follow up.
I guess that's the best option. What did you think of the music?
Well, I know in the MonsterVerse movies, they also throw in Ifukube's music, just the theme, the main theme, and they did that in this movie twice. And there was music from other Godzilla movies too.
Yeah, it was the main themes from King Kong vs. Godzilla and Mothra vs. Godzilla, which used that main Godzilla theme and then kind of add more to it.
Huge missed opportunity to have Godzilla vs. Anguirus fight music on the radio.
That actually would have been cool. This was the first Japanese Godzilla movie, as far as I can think, and I could be wrong, where those scenes are edited to match the music in terms of timing. And I thought that mostly really worked really well. Because most of the time, Ifukube was writing his music without watching the movie and just kind of had to write a piece and then they would just kind of play it over the footage in the movie. But in here, it's clear that the director was thinking of how things are going to match up with the music, which is more of a typical Western approach, I guess. And I thought it mostly really worked.
Yeah, I liked the music in this movie, and I'm not familiar enough with the themes to know what was original and what wasn't, but I liked all of the music in the movie.
I think those were really the only classic themes that were used. So it was pretty much just when Godzilla's attacking the train, kind of that whole scene, and then at the end with the boats. But yeah, I also liked the rest of the music in the movie. Really, the only time the music stood out in terms of kind of bringing attention to itself was when it was using those original themes. And I thought the rest of the music did a good job of fitting the scenes and really working without being distracting or anything like that.
I agree. So we recommend watching this movie.
Yes. It's not going to be one of my personal favorite Godzilla movies, but I did think it was a good movie. And I think really that comes more just from my personal preferences for Godzilla as a monster or for the monster aspects of the movie. But that's not what the movie focuses on. And the rest of it works well.
Yeah, really well. So we give it +10.
So that brings it up to Godzilla 9. Okay.
See, I said they had jokes for the end, but my King of the Monsters, 0, -1, that was the joke I'd say for the end. So people who made it to the end waiting for those jokes, the real joke is you waited till the end, which gets us full revenue.
So like half a cent for every 1,000 views.
-$1. Thanks for watching.